We are really excited to end the year with a really fun discussion about sports, business, and leadership. And you can see today we're taping some things. We wanted to be able to create something for the alumni and the greater community. So thanks for coming to the fireside chat. I think we're really going to have some fun. Mario Avila and I have been scheming on this idea for a couple of years. Yeah. So it's really exciting to finally see it come together. And we're here today with Coach Lea, of course, from the football team. Brent Turner, who is CEO of a healthcare company here in town called Summit Behavioral Health Corporation, right? And then we have a current MMark student, Gavin, and we're really excited that Gavin's here. And then down on the end, Reggie Ford is was a Mac student from 2014 and has done a whole bunch of different things here in town that we're going to tell you about along the way. So, Mario, kick it away.
Thank you, Dean Johnson. Thanks for everyone for being here. I'm going to kick it off with just a simple, easy question. What is your connection to Owen? Now, he mentioned your degrees, except Brent. So what's your connection to Owen? But even more so, like, what do you remember? Right? What's the one memory that you remember about being at Owen? But then also, since you all played football at Vandy, what position did you play? Brett, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, I'll start. So I was MAC class of 2014 after being undergrad here as well. And I think the thing I remember most about Owen is our group. It was about 44 of us. No, it was exactly 44 of us. And we were so tight-knit after our session with Dr. Rod Berger. This is something the MAC class does early on. And we just became this family really early on. And I love that. And then the last part of the question.
What position did you play?
What position did I play? I played butt back. So if anybody doesn't know what that is, you run on the field and coach is like, get your butt back. So, no, I played cornerback.
Awesome. Gavin.
Well, hi everybody. I'm Gavin Schoenwald. Like they said, I'm a current MMark student here and had the pleasure of being a tight end and a captain for Coach Lea on last year's team. Thoroughly enjoyed my time, and at this point last year, how I got connected with Owen. I remember Coach and I actually had extensive conversations about coming back to play my 5th year here at Vanderbilt, and I just was trying to figure out what's the best way to do that. What program and what can I kind of get the best bang for my buck, and that's where I stumbled upon the MMark. It's a one-year program, as you guys all know, with a focus in marketing, and so I thought that was the best avenue for me. And so really glad I'm here. Really glad, honored to be a part of this. Thank you guys for asking me, and looking forward to sharing my thoughts.
Brent?
Sure. Brent Turner, I graduated from the Owen School in 1989. I don't even know if you call them concentrations now, but back then I was a dual in accounting and finance. Yeah. And I actually came through the business school as a joint baccalaureate. So I did undergrad and the MBA in 5 years. Just was a walk-on. I actually was the original butt back because I was highly intelligent, I was decently intelligent, but not very athletic. But I loved to be out there, and so I tried to maximize the academic side, and so that's
great.
And I actually played a linebacker, but I spent most of my time on special teams.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Coach?
Yeah, Clark Lea, undergrad 04, no Owen connection, so I'm going to break the trend here. I roomed with Kenan Arkin, who's an MBA graduate, but unfortunately I was getting a master's in political science, which I still don't know what you do with that other than coach football. Obviously, as the head of the football program, it's been a great privilege to be able to facilitate some of our players coming over and advancing their education. I think it's such a huge deal for us to be able to offer that, and that partnership means so much. And I too am a butt back, which is a common theme here. I was a fullback in my day, which I don't know that position. The F that we use now, is runs jet sweeps and stuff. Well, that wasn't the F back in my day. I was lead blocking and that kind of thing. So,
thanks, Coach.
Yeah.
Eric?
Well, one of the things we really want to talk about today is really the kind of combination of athletics and business and leadership, things that, of course, students learn both in the game and in competition and learn here at the Owen School. And so I want to start with that question with you, Brent. How's your experience with college athletics impacted your leadership style in the business world?
Sure. I mean, I think it just sets the foundation. One, sports in general, right? I mean, kids start playing sports at a young age for teamwork and coordination and so forth. I think when you have the opportunity to play athletics at a collegiate level, there's a little bit of distinguishment there in terms of capabilities. But I think what you learn there is it becomes a little bit more than just a game, right? It is a business. A coach knows that very well. So the accountability, the discipline, the getting after it. I mean, so many of these things were a grind in athletics and football in the off season. Work is a grind sometimes. It's not always fun and the most glorious thing, but you have that built-in sort of discipline to know that there's a path and the work will pay off.
Yeah, Reggie.
Yeah, I'll piggyback. I think a lot of those same traits carried over. One thing that stood out for me is, I think for the buttbacks up here, at one point we were not buttbacks. In high school and even younger, like you become a leader of a team. And so I think through sports, understanding that everyone plays a different role in business as well. And so you can be the CEO, the head of an organization, but also the person on the bottom of the totem pole. And in each of those fields, you have value to add. And so I think that's something I carried over most. And then just time management, being able to carve out my days kind of like a camp schedule and just, 6 o'clock we were doing this, 7, 8, 9. I think that's something that is sometimes overlooked when you compare a student athlete's commitment to a non-student athlete's commitment. And so yeah, just being dedicated and accountable and knowing how to work with a team. I think those all are leadership skills that you learn from sports.
Yeah. And so, Gavin, you've been captain of the football team this past year, and I'd love for you and Coach Lee to talk a little bit about how you think about leadership out on the field.
Yeah, well, I think before you even get on the field, it starts in the locker room. And I think college football is so unique, especially with the people who are still keeping up with how college football is going with the transfer portal and these random people honestly just kind of showing up in your locker room, and I guess they're on the team now. That's kind of the truth of how it is. And it's different than high school where you grow up with with your buddies and you guys all think the same way and act the same way, and it's not that way in a college locker room. And so, for me, a kid from Brentwood, Tennessee, how can I connect with teammates from Pompano Beach, Florida, or people from New Jersey or Michigan? It's all different, and I think it starts there, honestly. And then, not only with that, but how does that translate to the business world? Although I haven't even started my career there yet, I have here at Owen, and I will say too, I think with a couple of my classmates here too, it's hard for me to get stressed over group presentations or work or everything like that, because I've been having to go out there and perform in front of 100,000 people screaming at me. And so here I'm relaxed and I'm confident and humble in my approach as well, but. I think everything that I've learned from being a part of a team of different cultures and coming together literally to achieve one goal, it's honestly kind of amazing when you step back and look at it and how that whole team functions.
Yeah. Coach, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. And I think I'd start just by saying I think this comes right out of the $1 Trillion Coach book, but it's, your title makes you a manager, your people make you a leader. And I think that's a really important part of leadership is modeling, is being relatable. The term vulnerability, it comes up as kind of a catchphrase now, but I think that's a real thing. Is your guard down? Are you letting people in? What I've found, at least early in on the rebuild of our program, is I can't afford to pull back and delegate at times. They need to see me with my sleeves rolled up in the trenches. Football in college in particular is a really kind of a test of human capacity, and connection's a big part of that. We'll go a lot further. This is the name of the game, is like shared suffering. I know that sounds a little weird, but it is what it is. I mean, the work has to be done, and the spirit with which we do the work has everything to do with the people that are around us. And the deeper the connections, the more we're willing to put ourselves at risk and to go further in our preparation. And as a leader, I need to both articulate that and kind of give purpose behind the pain at times, but also model that too, to say, I'm willing to show up and be right here alongside you.
You remind me of a quote from Dean Johnson early on when I came on. He talked about business education and the fact that business education is a contact sport. You got to roll up your sleeves. We learn so much in the classroom, But at the end of the day, the work that we do, like the work that we do out of our center, right, the Turner Family Center, that's what it is, right? We're rolling up our sleeves and we're getting in there. And so if you touched on it a little bit, Coach, but Gavin, since you're the closest to it, we have 3 generations. We skipped the 90s, but we have the 80s, the early 2000s, the teens, and the 20s.
Yep.
So when you think about teamwork and you think about not only the classroom, but moving on, whether it's the NFL or in business, what's important about what Coach talked about in terms of empathy and vulnerability? Because we never talk about that, right?
No.
We really don't talk about that
Not
on
a
the
lot.
team, especially now when we're going out, right, in Tuscaloosa
Yeah.
and talk about vulnerability.
Yeah. Well, I think, like Coach was saying, it starts at the top. We look, you want to be a leader on your team, but there's somebody above me, and that's my coaches and him and others. And you talk about vulnerability and passion. Really, that's the word that I find from this. And I see that with him more than anybody. The way he speaks to us in team meetings beforehand. I mean, he's literally emotional about our program, and it's hard for me to not be as a player and a fellow leader, not necessarily a peer, but a fellow leader, someone who's trying to carry out his message and his brand. When he's acting that way, it's hard for me not to match that energy, if that makes sense. And so it all starts at the top, and we all know that, but that's with everything. It starts at the top, and we learned that, I'd say the hard way when he first came in. That first couple months was brutal. I was telling Reggie about it beforehand. I'm not even sure, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'm not even sure at that point it was about winning games. It was just about trying to kill us and see who's left.
Survival of the fittest.
I made it because I'm sitting here today. And but that's where it started, and that's where it was made. And now I look back, and I guess we're like two and a half years removed from that. And that's where it all started. But no, to answer your question, the passion and all that, it stems from the top. And I think as players, we see it from him and from our coaching staff as well. And it's hard for us not to mirror that.
Yeah. I'd like to just say something, because I think I want to just capture this because I agree that, and I talk a lot about that first, really that first year as being one of the most painful experiences that I've had as a competitor. And in a lot of ways, I needed that because I realized that it wasn't about me, it was about what we're building together. I think if you go back and actually look at the work that we put in that winter, it probably was and this is interesting to me, and I'm sure there's a carryover, it's probably the least amount of volume that we did or have done to this point, but it was the mindset around it that made it so hard. And not that there weren't some really cold moments in the stadium and some dark moments too, but I think in the end, again, that goes back to that, you build resilience, you build capacity, and what you thought was hard was actually really more of a barrier that you had mentally or internally. And once you break through that, to me, that's where your confidence has grown. So just an interesting thought. Listen to Gavin reflect on that.
You both say that, and you're talking about football and your experience. Most of our students say that after the first mod, second mod,
Yeah, that's right.
year one. Why are we doing this? What's the purpose of it? Brent, as the most seasoned of the football guys up here, does any of that resonate when you think about your business and your career since you left Owen?
Absolutely. I mean, life is just a series of opportunities to, enhance that experience. The building blocks. I mean, there's a lot of cliches, but it's the truth. I mean, if you look back, what you see is a lot of incremental steps along the way. Some are painful, some are enjoyable, but I think the combination of because look, the academic rigor at Owen that's required to stay on pace here is high, right? Just like on the athletic field. So those do build, those principles are established, and you can see, the benefit.
That's great. Well, we're thinking about lessons, and again, thinking about difficult situations you faced in business. For example, Reggie, in your own career, were there times that you were able to draw back on things you learned in athletics that help you navigate those difficult situations?
Absolutely. I think to Gavin's point, doing work in a classroom beats doing gassers on the football field any day. And so when the turmoil hits from a business perspective, you can always lean back on those things. And Coach mentioned this. Coach mentioned a couple of words that just really stuck out to me. But suffering and pain and purpose, and kind of aligns with this process that I've coined, the process of perseverance throughout all the things that I'm most passionate about in my life. And the process from pain to passion, passion to purpose, purpose to power, power to peace, where peace is that ultimate goal that you've achieved. And I think when whether it be personal or professional obstacles in the way, that is some pain. And then working through those things, it takes leaning back on the times when things were hard and you figured out a way to get through it, right? Football is a great metaphor for life. Football is a great metaphor. Sports in general for business and for life. And so, countless times where I would hit a roadblock or be met with some kind of challenge, and just channel all of those lessons that I learned from sports.
That's great. Brent, you have one to share? Difficult situation that you overcame and used some things you learned out with your friends on the football field.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, so many times the vulnerability, I think, is, when you're on the football field, there's no hiding, right? In the workout room. I mean, you may be the strongest, you may not be the strongest, but you bring what you got. And the same way in the in business, you've got weaknesses and things that get exposed. I guess for me, it was probably more recently when I took the job at Summit Behavioral Healthcare. It's my first time I had the opportunity to be a CEO, right? I'd always thought I wanted to be the leader, and had been in situations, captain of the football team, but CEO in the hierarchy, right? The buck stops there. But you go back to a lot of those foundational principles around, I want to be a leader by example. I'm going to lead, I'm going to work the hardest. And so it's just every day, like I said, it does come back to roost, if you will, some of those foundations for sure.
That's great. And Gavin, you were saying obviously that some days school seemed easy compared to what you were dealing with out on the field.
For sure.
It gave you perspective. Is that what you're?
I would say that's really accurate. I'd say that's really accurate. There's perspective and everything. And I think, for really, and this kind of encapsulates our whole conversation here. This most recent topic is, I feel like, especially after this last year ended, I've kind of done a lot of reflecting just on my journey of my time here. When I first got here, what did things look like? I'm about to leave after my 5th year. What does it look like now? And everything in between. I've kind of become obsessed with the journey, if you will.
Yeah.
And I think so many times as humans in anything, whether it's our corporate jobs, our coaching jobs, our lives as students, it's so easy to just think that what's in front of us is this huge mountain and whatnot, and that sun's going to come up tomorrow, and the next day is going to happen. And I think also too, and we've talked about this in team meetings too. A lot of times people say, or you guys heard the term like trust the process, right? People say all the time. Well, to me, the process is how you envision it going, and that doesn't ever happen, right? And so to me, it's more so about embracing the journey, and that's something that I've kind of coined, especially since our season ended and I'm on a new journey now, and I'm sure I'll have 99 other journeys throughout the rest of my life, but I'm sure that's something we all can resonate with.
Yeah. Coach, I mean, when you think about the journey these guys are all on, and they're with you for a short time, and then off for a career of challenges in whatever area they choose, how do you hope they remember the things that they learned with you?
Well, I think the things we learn become amplified over time as our experience grows. And I just listening to the question and the responses, I think about, I believe it's Tennyson has said, "I am a part of all that I have met." So much of the process of being an athlete, particularly at this level, is about the becoming. You're actually crystallizing an identity within you that will be shaped further as you move on. But every situation you step into, you carry with you your past experience, and it strengthens you. And so, we're all becoming something through our habits and behaviors, and I think we all need to pay attention to that because, in our experience, it's very easy because there's very specific structure that we're going to be in. There's demands, and again, you're going to have teammates, and our environment's very easy to teach these lessons through. But beyond athletics, I think that we need to be paying attention to what we're becoming through the good things that we learn, and also the really painful times as well, because in the end, they all form us into the person. And I think one thing that Brent shared was I think about leveling up in roles and just, you go from a GA to a position coach and you're not ready for it. You go from a position coach to the coordinator, you're not ready for that. And certainly in this role, I feel like I'm learning every day, and it's okay not to know it, and what's most painful is when people pretend like they know it, it's okay, like that's where I think letting your guard down and saying, hey, I'm figuring this out too, I got to get better too. But just having the confidence to lean on your past experience, to not validate you, but to inform you of how to move forward and how to set your process forward.
Let's talk about, you brought something that I think would be important as we think about the crowd, right? Not only current students, current student athletes, former student athletes, those that might not have been athletes, but when you think about leadership, it's always important, and it's funny to look back, right? So head football coach, CEO of his company, captain of the football team, president of his private wealth firm, recent author, dean of the business school, me. What is it that you wish you knew in this role, right? In your leadership role as head coach, and I'll give you a couple seconds, Coach. We'll start with Gavin since he's the youngest. Should think on his feet. What is it about your leadership role that you wish you knew walking in to being the captain of the team that someone told you?
That's a great question, and to me, I honestly would say, and we've as a program, I've grown. We've been doing these, basically the weekly leadership meetings with Scott Brower, who is in charge of, basically the entire leadership of our team. And one thing that I've pulled from those meetings is that there's not one way to do leadership. And I guess everyone has their own styles and there's different ways of doing things, but there's not, it's not this way or the wrong way. And so I think just an adoption of a bunch of principles, and also too, if you're a leader, there's got to be followers as well. And sometimes your followers react differently to different styles. And so I think, and like I said earlier, based off of, the personalities, the cultures of the people in your locker room who are from totally different places in the country, you have to approach those guys differently. Whether it's accountability, whether it is a congratulations thing. Some people honestly don't even want to hear that, and some people just want to be motivated. And so there's different approaches to how you do things. And so I wish that I knew, as my freshman and sophomore self, who had all the answers in the world at the time, I wish that I knew that it wasn't, my way or the highway when I thought about leadership. And instead, you kind of have to adapt to your followers.
Brent?
I'd say for me, it's the kind of realizing that I wish I'd known vulnerability was okay sooner. I think, just coming up from my background through, both sports and you're just kind of a grinder. I thought I had to be sort of the toughest, the smartest, the most rigid. But really, the more my career has evolved and life has gone on, the most important touch points are around something other than just the business that's going on. It's the intangibles. Somebody's in need of something, they need to hear something. Just being open and sharing perspective. Because what I look back and say, man, what if 20 years I'd been a little more open for that. But then again, what I always say is you got to live tomorrow. So going ahead. But I think it's just that acceptance that and I'm in behavioral healthcare, right? So vulnerability and knowing you don't have to have it all figured out and not everything's perfect in your world. I mean, so that would be probably the major thing.
I would say two things. One, I wish that I knew that there was going to be a global pandemic and that 40-year inflation was going to be what it is and all that. But no, I think to that point though, just knowing that whatever plan you come up with is going to blow up somewhere somehow. So you can try to predict all the different components of what life or what business is going to be like, but it's not going to play out that way. And I feel for myself personally just very prepared and very well planned out in the business plan and how I went about finding advisors and different things like that. But again, being serious, there was a global pandemic right as I was starting my or a couple years after starting my business, and that changed so much of the landscape of wealth management and how I run my business. And then on the other side, I think this is, I don't know if I've ever said this, but redefining redefining success and for it to match what a person's a person's core values are. I think it's too easy to get into a group think when you're going into business and then going into a career and measuring success by whatever it may be, status or money or whatever, when your values or your life may not fit that. And for me, achieving so many of the things that check the box as traditional success, but then being miserable, when we talk about being vulnerable, having experiences in life where all that stuff didn't make me happy, and I'm trying to figure out what, at the core, what is going to satisfy me. I think it was a matter of redefining what looked like success, and that could be, more days off, more times with family, just being able to take care of yourself. And so I think if I could go back several years, it would be understanding that earlier.
Right. You want in on this? Or you wish you knew?
I've got lots more than that. I got lots more. But I really like what Brent said about vulnerability. I think it's so true that many times in any kind of position you feel like, as the coach said, you're supposed to know it right away or whatever, and everyone has to be a learner. We're all learners. So.
Yeah. Before I kick it to Coach, I would say for me it's and we're the same age, how fast time goes. And before you know it, right? And just how important that is when you think about your own leadership, and remembering that tomorrow's here and it's not going to stop. And so just reflecting on that, I wish, and people have said it, but I wish it really stuck with me, of how fast time moves. Yeah. Coach?
Yeah, I think my first response to this is that I do feel like leadership is a skill and a journey in and of itself. I don't think that I could have, there's no Cliff Notes. And I don't even know if Cliff Notes exist anymore, but that was, obviously I knew about them when I was going through high school.
For good reason.
That's right.
ChatGPT.
That's right.
You can't circumvent a process of learning in the roles. What I would say to that younger version of myself is that kind of twofold. The first is, don't make yourself small. I think we tend to shrink back. We create more reasons not to step into leadership than we do see ourselves as capable. I think when your core values align with the mission of the team, then you should feel very confident to step in and speak up and feel, I say this to the team now, but one of our big kind of hurdles we have to clear here in this team is player-to-player accountability. And I learned as a player to look at if I am of the program and the program is of me, then if I see something that I don't speak up, a part of me dies. And I think the more we create those connections to who we are and what we're a part of, the easier it is, not in dumb ways, but in really constructive ways, to step in and redirect behavior where needed. The other thing that I would say would kind of to piggyback off what Reggie said is just to that younger version of myself that really the journey starts when adversity sets in. We as a team, we say training starts in adversity. So, when your plans like blow up, that's really when the fun starts. You kind of get to know about yourself and again, about your level of resiliency. And we're all works in progress, so we can all always get better and kind of move the dials to where we're able to withstand more adversity. But that's kind of the inevitable part of this, and not to shrink from it, but to step into it and actually like smile through it and say, hey, this is it. This is, I get to find out about myself. Or those would be things I'd want to share with my younger self.
That's neat. Well, one of the things I love about Owen is how our alumni give back in so many ways. And both Brent and Reggie have been back on campus lots of times talking to our students and helping them think through their careers and think through tough topics. And I'd love, Reggie, I'll start with you. I'd love for you to share a story of a mentor that you had or a coach along the way that you learned from that helped you down the road, whether it be on the field or in business. Certainly you've done that for many folks here at Owen, and as you kind of work through your own amazing career as an author and wealth manager and all these kinds of things. Can you share one from your own?
Yeah, there was a mentor of mine who recently passed away, but Joe Davis, our relationship started when I was 10 years old. He started an organization called Backfield in Motion, which was how I first started to play this great game of football. And eliminated all the barriers to a kid growing up in poverty to be able to play sports and not have to worry about transportation fees or anything like that. But he stuck with me through high school, through college, through the early parts of my career. And the advice that I would get from him was so different because he had experienced a life totally different from the life that I experienced. And so Coach knows who I'm talking about, and some of his reputation and things may not always be the greatest because he was just a fun guy to be around. But I think what he instilled in me was, things like holding your integrity as high as you can, and being a man of your word, and always showing respect to those who came before you. And things like that will stick with me forever. And then when I started to branch out into the business world, I would always bounce ideas off of him just to see if I was thinking through things all the way. And he would challenge me. And I think that was one of the greatest parts, because I think peers and friends oftentimes, even if they want to see you do great, they're gonna be more yes men and accepting of the path that you've chosen. But a good mentor is going to not only validate what you're doing, but also push you and challenge you to make it even better. And that was something that he did nonstop. And so yeah, he's one that from football, from life, just being a kid, to football, to business, was there throughout all of that. So yeah.
For me, I would say. I think I'm at a stage in my life where I'm still just trying to talk to as many people as I can. And I think my fellow students here will agree with me. We've been networking our tails off for many months. And Coach says this all the time, but successful people leave clues. They do. And whether you're networking with a CEO somewhere or someone on an executive team of whatever company, whether you have 0 chance or a 90% chance of getting a job with them, a conversation will not hurt you. If anything, you can get a little nugget and learn something, and all of a sudden you put all these things together and you finally figure it out. I will say though, specifically, I remember the first time I met Mario, we were at a internship fair my sophomore year, and I was all nervous, I had my resume in hand and was walking around and talking to people, and one of my teammates was like, "Oh, you got to meet Mario, he's great, he's awesome with student athletes." And I met him, and I'll never forget, you looked me in the eye and you're like, "So what do you want to do?" And me and all nervous, I was like, "I don't know, I don't want to do a desk job though, I know I want to work with people." And Mario paused and he goes, yeah, that's a really crappy answer. And I was just so shook that he said that. But so I've never had someone be that direct with me as a personal and business coach. I get that all the time from people in our building and position coaches and everything like that. And so I think ever since that moment, as shocked as I was that he was that direct with me, I think we've kind of built a relationship out of that too, because that's how I've been coached my entire life. It's just been in a little bit of a different environment. And so thank you for that. I'm not even sure if you knew you left that on me. But that is people talk about core memories. It's a core memory of mine that I'll have for a while.
I passed that one on because one of our coaches here from our leadership development team back in the day told me the same thing. She asked, she said, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" And I said, "I don't know, I just want to be around people. I want to work with people." And she said, "That's a bullshit answer."
That's the word he said, but I didn't know. That's actually what he said.
Brent, a mentor that you learned from.
Yeah, from going back to my time at Vanderbilt, I'd have to say, and some people in this room will remember the individual, Brad Bates, who was our strength and conditioning coach for Vanderbilt. Ultimately, got his PhD here I think in the education department, a doctorate, and he became an athletic director at a couple of different schools. But again, back in the '80s, it was a little bit tough times for Vanderbilt football. And but Brad, every day he showed up, he was making sure the guys were there for purpose, right? And he led by example. He was phenomenal. Not a giant, but very strong in a unique way. And you see somebody with that kind of commitment. I'd argue he had as much commitment as some of the coaches on the staff for what we were trying to accomplish.
Wow.
And it was a real bond. And he and I are friends to this day. And it was interesting just from a coach, then to his business career and mine parallel, and just a lot of good memories there.
That's great. Coach?
Yeah, and I think I happen to know Brad. There's a guy who Brent interacted with as a strength coach, right?
Yep.
And then rose to levels of success, was an athletic director, now moved on and doing big things in kind of the headhunting world. But just what does success look like as a foundation? He felt the passion and energy behind it. For me, in coaching, the biggest mentor I've had is John Stiglmeyer, who's the head coach of South Dakota State. And I think, to go back to something that Brent said earlier about wishing that he had stepped into vulnerability earlier in his career, I think that's something that has to be modeled for you. Like, it's particularly as a young man, you're constantly spending your time and energy putting out an image of yourself that you want to be consumed, and it's exhausting. And when you're around someone who is so comfortable in their skin and so authentic to who they are, and opens you up to that. Like John Stiglmeyer showed me what it meant to be a coach that was focused on the whole person as a player, and to develop the whole person, and to not make things transactional, which is so easy to do as a coach. I've pulled on. My first full-time job was South Dakota State. So. The two things that stay with me to this day is Coach Stiglmeyer's, imprint on my foundation as a coach, and then I met my wife in South Dakota too. So that's pretty good as well.
Can't beat that.
Yeah.
Can't beat that. We're going to go to the audience pretty shortly for questions. So come up with some questions while Mario poses his last one.
So we're talking about so it's a bunch of football guys up here, and we're talking about vulnerability. And you kicked off the next question, Coach, about love. How do you, and in the book, $1 Trillion Coach, talk about, Bill Campbell often talked about love and leadership and the importance of that. When you think about the work that you do, you've alluded to this already. How important is it, or where have you used love in your leadership style with your team? Well,
I see what I do as parenting. I think I shared this, and I don't know if Gavin will remember this, and I'm not sure the level of language we're allowed to use here, but Mario, using your lead. One of the things that hit me my first year was like, it was very painful, but it was like, the experience is like when you're having your first kid, and it's, you sit there and your wife's pregnant, and, I'm talking to it was C3, my first son, talking to him every day, feeling him kick. All the hopes and dreams that you could ever have, are sitting there in her stomach. And then there comes a day where you go to the hospital, and now you're holding those hopes and dreams in your hand, and you look, it's the most human moment, and then he shits on you. And, you have to learn how to put a diaper on. And what you realize in that process is that those hopes and dreams are still there, but I've got to nurture those every single day. It's what I invest in the person, how I love that person, how I continuously connect them to higher versions of themselves, and hold standards too. Love is accountability to me. Now, I can't say that and not also be really good at showing affection and letting people in. They need to understand that there is never going to be a soft space in my office for behavior that undercuts our foundation, but they will get my attention and my affection every single day. And I think the longer you play those relationships out, don't look at them as this is for this year or this is for this week. It's, I'm every day trying to coach people into not the finished version of themselves, just the next version. To me, that's allowed me to really be open and honest and show care and affection. And I tell the players that I love them. I say that. I think it's important to say that to people, because in the end, I'm calling them into action that is beyond what is really, we conceive as human. Like, we work really, really hard. And when you go at something together, you build bonds that many people don't understand, but we need to share our affection for each other and speak it.
Who wants to follow that?
I'll follow.
Right.
I'll say, following Coach, as a player, a follower, an employee, it's hard to work for someone, especially work for someone as hard as we do or as people do in their jobs if you know they don't love and care for you. And so, and the only way that's built is over time, right? It's not like someone can just say, I love you, and you're just kind of like, yeah. Like, that is built over time. And I think with Coach, that was, I remember when I scored my first touchdown, he was the first person to grab there and hug me up, and there's a picture of it. And that's probably something he doesn't even remember. But I just think as humans, we have moments where we have so much power and we don't even realize over other people's lives, and can literally either alter someone's life or at least create, like one of those core memories like I talked about, that you can leave an impact on someone that can maybe take 10, 15 seconds of our day with, burning 1 calorie while you're doing it. Mm-hmm. And so, no, I think that, showing love and affection for the people who you want to lead, you have to win them first. You have to win them first, and that's through love and trust, and that's what he's done. That's what our coaching staff has done, and like we've said previously, it took time. It took years, honestly, and I don't think it ever ends either. I think it's just a continual build.
Yeah, and I saw Professor Lamb, there he is. He uses the book Radical Candor in one of his classes, and so between that one and Bill Campbell talks about a mirror, right? You talked about that, putting a mirror up to your face, supporting you, but at the same time telling you when you messed up, Gavin, right? When you think about that, you can't be effective unless those that you're coaching or you're working with know that you care deeply about them. And so, when have you gotten that tough love, Reggie? When someone raised a mirror up to your face and said, look, Reggie, you're great, but you messed up, or you need to look at this?
I think that's a great question. Go back to another mentor of mine. She's actually an Owen grad, Becky Sharp. She, I think I tend to oversimplify things, and then try to get to a solution, which I think is a good trait to have. But then sometimes you just need to press a little bit harder. And she's somebody who, from day one, we met probably 4 years ago, but from day one started that process of building that trust and that love for me, to where I felt like I could go to her for anything. And so in the process of writing my book, which is a memoir, a very vulnerable expression of myself, something I hadn't done to that date, she was one of the people that I went to just read through it. And I was terrified when I pressed send on the manuscript on the email, just because a lot of those stories people hadn't heard, and I didn't know what to expect or how I was going to respond to their reactions and things. And she had some constructive feedback, it was all constructive criticism and different things that pointed out. And I think my initial reaction was just like this defensiveness and abrasiveness of, who is this person to tell me about my life and my story? But it wasn't coming from that. And her intentions were pure. Her intentions were to make the book as good as it could be, or to at least just help me out as much as she could. And so I think, I wouldn't have trusted her with that piece of the process if it wasn't for that. And, I would have responded differently, I think, had I not been so connected to her and felt that love and trust to begin with. So she's one, and shout out to Becky Sharp. Yeah.
Before we kick it off, because I know there are going to be some questions, Brent, do you want to answer that? How you're doing, and who's done that for you?
I thought you were going to let me have a pass. I didn't read the book.
How are you doing that? You don't get to be a CEO of your company without either showing love or putting a mirror up to your team.
Absolutely. I mean, everything these guys have said is true. I think, love's got to, it drives you, right? We got family or whatever drives you in passion. I think the twist I'd put on it, just for the business aspect, is, there's a lot of things we can do, with the skill set. But I would say, looking back, the thing I would search for is, what's your passion, right? The mission orientation. Do something that feels good too, because there's a lot of things out there that can deliver both the economic things that we're looking for, but also the fulfillment.
Great.
All right. Questions from the audience? Having so much fun here, yeah.
I'd be curious if y'all could speak to how you found the balance between holding on to your experience as an athlete versus having that be in the past, because being an elite athlete is such a unique and transformative experience. It really makes you who you are. It opens so many doors to meeting other former athletes in other areas of life. But you also, so you don't want to just leave it behind, but you also don't want your identity to be tied to something that's in the past and hanging on to the glory days, things like that. So just kind of what you've found helpful in finding that balance going forward.
Mary Caton swam at UT.
You want to summarize that, Mario, for
Yeah.
the audience?
So how do you find balance after being an elite athlete, right? You're an elite athlete, you're moving on, you're going into the business world. How do you find balance in your life between that and not holding on to those glory days? What do you do to move on?
I'll say, for me, when I stopped playing football, I actually still had eligibility left, and it was a personal choice to start to think about that next phase of life for me. And the first thing that came up for me was grief. And I think, when it comes to something like a sport or an activity or something like that, we don't often associate that loss with grief. But for me, it was akin to losing, one of my best friends. And so initially I had to get over that piece of it, to where, the year after I stopped playing football, I didn't watch a single football game. I didn't go to anything, and just because it hurt to not be out there. But then I think as life evolves, like the only constant in life is change. And so everything is constantly evolving. You start to find other passions. You start to find different things that you love, and that starts to kind of replace that huge piece of your heart that was that sport. And then eventually, I think, by following your passion, you start to then be identified with something else, right? Like I didn't mention it earlier, but I'm a yoga instructor now, right? So that was like the next phase of my athletic career, if you want to call it that. But people see me with yoga and finance and perseverance in my book and everything. And so I think you just constantly evolve. You constantly evolve, and it becomes it does become a thing of the past, but it's always with you. To that quote that Coach mentioned earlier, all those things. I'm gonna botch it. So, but all of that is a part of you still.
Right. Go, Coach.
Yeah, that's important. Like, you never lose that person. You evolve that person. I think you learn more about your competitive self as you distance from competitive moments. I think just from a social standpoint, no one wants to hear you talk about your glory days. And by the way, too, you're probably a way better athlete than maybe everyone except for Gavin. I think I tend to embrace that person that I was more now than I probably did, or understand that person better now than I did then. And I absolutely draw a line from the choices and decisions, behaviors I was taking on as a competitor, how those shifted as my life evolved into allowing me to create distance from my competitors in the world I stepped into. So I think you embrace it. And the last thing I'll say is this: I learned as a coach, I couldn't coach people like they were mini versions of me. Like that almost, I think I was burning people out early on because I had really high expectations. I think the business world would be the same, that as an elite performer, an elite athlete, you're used to pouring into something, and not everyone's going to be wired that way. So are you doing the most important things at a high level, and not to carry your expectations and put them onto other people, but to stay focused on what needs to happen, how is it happening, and where it's not, you go in and support, but don't judge people off what you know to be commitment, because you're like us. I mean, you're a little psycho that way, I would imagine. That's okay.
Great. Another question. Yeah, Will.
Thanks, Mario. Coach, I'd like to hear a bit about recruiting, in that I think the transfer portal in college athletics sort of reflects our generation's outlook on work. Most of us are not going to be working 20 years for a company, 30 years for a company, and accepting a pension like some of our parents and grandparents got to do. So what do you look for in recruits, and sort of getting that buy-in, getting a guy you know is going to believe in your school and be around for a while, like we will be doing in the professional world as we go into management?
Well, first of all, I transferred twice. But one of the reasons is that Vanderbilt didn't let me in out of high school, so that's a whole other story. my transfers were about a journey of self-discovery that I didn't really understand. In fact, the first part of my career, I was really embarrassed by it until I recognized what was going on. And that was, I thought I was going to be a Major League Baseball player, and I just wasn't good enough. And, you know, my decision to come to Vanderbilt was a mirror moment for myself, where it was like, I want to try to be successful, and I'm not, the path that I thought I had set is really not aligned with what's going on. So let me make a choice to go to the best possible school I can get into. And football happened to be a part of my experience here too. We are in a very interesting time, and I think there's a lot that we're doing in terms of program design that have to do with the program that I want to be a part of, not necessarily reaction to the environment. However, I feel like the program that I want to be a part of allows us to differentiate in this market, and I think that's important. Like, we can actually create a niche here while everyone else they're worried about players on other teams. We shift focus to our team, and people are smart, they're perceptive. They know when you have their best intention, or they know when they're being invested in. They also know when you're giving them lip service and going to do something else. So we are trying, like, as you know, the college athletics world steers one way, we are dramatically steering the other way. And it's not that we don't embrace name, image, likeness or any of that. We're just always going to put the person first. And when it comes to recruiting, again, this is the challenge that I make all the time to our staff. We're recruiting to the program as it is, right? We're not recruiting to the program as that person may want it to be. So for us, it's about standing in front of them and being totally authentic. Also letting our guards down, and we'll have families around and make it an immersive experience. But I'm not going to sit there and sell them something that's not going to be there when they show up, because I think Gavin was talking about trust. Trust starts, to me, in that initial conversation. And the minute I promise something or try to skew something to make it look a little better, to me, at that point, I've undercut my ability to sustain trust. And retention, from my vantage point, is about investment in people, authentic relationships, and traction and development, right? What inspires someone to come back in the building every day? They like the people that they're around. They know they're challenged, but they're cared for. There's a sense of belonging there, and they're getting better. I think you could also say retention's about transaction too. It's about prestige and about money, but we're not. That's not what we're peddling. And part of that is just based off the core identity of what Vanderbilt is. Again, the program that I want to be a part of, and it allows me to be authentic to who I am every day, which really feels great as a leader.
Before I go to the next question, Mary Caton and Will, I'll briefly answer both of your questions from my personal experience. One is Mary Caton, right? I played defensive tackle in college. I'm just playing a different game, right? I just have different teammates, and I'm just helping put them in different spots on the field. I'm still playing. I'm just playing a different game. And when you realize that, it becomes very powerful to know that. But if not, you could keep all the medals, and you could always open them up and give them a sniff to remember. Will, from the business school education from my perspective, that recruitment, I'm investing in the next 40 years of your life, right? That's what you come here to do. That's the game that we're playing, is how am I investing in you? How am I helping you become a better player in business for 40 years? That's how I see it.
And double click on that once more, Mario. How do you see that from the point of view as director of the Center for Social Ventures?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting that we talk about that, right? We talk about love, we talk about vulnerability. In class earlier today, I was talking about empathy, right? We gotta start with empathy. If I gotta at least try to understand where you're coming from and what shoes you're wearing by the time you got here. And so for me, it's not just about making money. It's not just about the next big thing. It's really about that impact, that those 10 seconds. I mentioned something similar in class today, Gavin. Those 10 seconds, you don't know how much influence you have on an individual, and it might only be 10 seconds of your life. And so to me, that's wealth, right? So the wealth is your network. The wealth is the impact that you have on society and what you leave behind. It's not necessarily just financial. It's important. And so at our center, it's that, right? Working on the individual and what we do to just make this world a better place.
You know what, too, I just learned to do, I'd like to double click on that too. I don't know how much double clicking goes on anymore. But I just, on that note, like, you understand too that this is 4 years for us, right? It's not 40 in terms of their time with us. Also think what we can do, what we should do are two different things. What does the transfer portal allow? It allows for you to find a new experience that hopefully improves your lot. But the truth is, every time you leave a place, you have to learn a new language. You have to learn new people. You're handing over trust. That takes time, like Gavin talked about. I say this a lot, and this is becoming more and more apparent to me, and it really, honestly, deepens in my own kind of self-awareness, but we can't spend our lives jumping from lily pad to lily pad on the surface of the pond. That's not where you discover self. You have to, at some point, fully submerge. And I don't know that that means that you have to work and retire somewhere and have a pension there. I think it means you need to be somewhere long enough to leave it better than you found it, and to really like dive in and say, I'm gonna fully commit to this. I also think when you do that, not only do you learn about yourself, not only do you feel like you're a part of something bigger than yourself, to me, that's where the next opportunity is presented too. It's only in my commitment to go deep. And not that I've intended to leave places as a coach. It's just the better I've done at submerging, the more opportunities comes. I'm doing a better job too. Anyways.
Couple questions.
Brandon?
Dan.
Yeah, thanks for coming out, guys. We see the end product, which is the football game, the results, or the quarterly financials, the 10K. We see we're making money, we're not making money. Can you guys give us, like, I don't know, a process or something that you guys do kind of tangibly that we can, take on how you're able to develop, Coach Lee, the changing the culture, or Brent, being the CEO, that you do personally to make sure that you're putting your team, your company in the best position to succeed, whether it's a weekly practice, a monthly practice, something that you guys do that we can take away to maybe implement to our games?
I think that book talks about, one-on-ones and group feedback. I think that's huge, and that some of that stuff you feel like is checking the box, but when you do it right, I think you can really discover about where someone is. And I always say that those opportunities for us aren't, as coaches, a chance to judge someone, but to build internal feedback loops. Like, my goal would be that they're able to redirect their behavior, their choices in small ways before that big meeting comes. The other thing we talk about is just the 24-hour day, and that's the gift we have, and how we invest our time in that 24 hours will make a difference over time. So really trying to empower them to take ownership of the boundaries that they need to create for themselves in order to, over time, aggregate into the performer they want to be. And I don't know that there are a lot of there's certainly some, but like bad people walking the earth. Like, I think that our habits and behaviors bleed when they're not boundaries, when there aren't things that keep us in line. And I think a great coach, a great CEO helps to create those boundaries for the people around them.
Yeah, I think maybe one thing I'd say is a little, it's so easy just to look at the tangible results of what you're doing. I think from my perspective, you've got to make sure to keep that the extension of yourself alive, in focus. And so you think about the mind being the work, the spirit being, your spiritual life, and then family, right? We all have family in some level. So keeping that in perspective, and you never can keep them perfectly balanced, but just trying to keep them all spinning at the same time. I'm oldest guy up here, so I've had a lot of opportunity to do that. But I think that also makes it worthwhile, because you keep things in perspective, because, a title is just a title, right? It's like what you're doing, why you're doing it, who you're doing it for, or really what makes a difference.
Gavin?
Yeah, I think, for me, I may have a different answer because I'm still in it. But I think something I can pull out of, and meetings with Coach Lee and position coaches and such is, every choice you make is either a vote for or against who you want to be, and your future self. And so, although like it's in the present moment, you make however many decisions during a day, however many decisions during a week, and then all of a sudden you look up 6 months, a year, 2 years from now, and you either say, I'm really proud of what I've become, or I wish I did this. And so that's something we talked about in meetings all the time. And also, too, like another thing that I feel like I appreciated was I knew I was going to get coach's authentic self. I knew I was going to get my position coach's authentic self. I remember, just like I'm sure every single person in here that, as a corporate job, they have end of the year review meetings, and we have those roundtable meetings as well. And I remember after his first year, I felt good about where I stood. I was like, man, I feel like I tried to do all the things right, checked all the boxes. And I remember I went in there and they kind of got into me a little bit. And not that I did anything wrong, but they could push me to another level. There was another level that I could reach. And, I think if we didn't have that meeting, I may never have been a captain for coach. I may never have gotten into the role that I feel like I could best serve the team. And so, I seeked out leaders, and I appreciated leaders that pushed me, and although they were uncomfortable in times, and I didn't want to hear that. And I think kind of like you said, like earlier, when they first told me something like that, I kind of had my defense fists up, right? And but now, being removed from it, understanding it, seeking out people that may not always want to tell you what you want to hear, but they're right. And that's something that I definitely took from my experience with Coach, and about daily choices, but also as a whole. So.
I think kind of a theme throughout it is just the habits that you implement throughout your day. And some of the habits that I like to lean on, first it starts with my personal habits. And so every morning I make my bed, right? And it's something simple, but it triggers, like there's this process of completion. Something's going to get completed. Something's going to look better than what it looked like before. And so it starts with that. Then I meditate and journal, and then I, may walk around, and then I'm ready for my day. And then it transitions into something else. So I have to, on certain days, there's going to be this many calls, there's going to be this many meetings, and you're not going to always see the results during that time. And it's about trusting that process or embracing that journey, like trusting that even when the results aren't coming, so that at December 31st or at year end or whatever time frame you want to define your success by, you can look at it and say, wow, it didn't feel like I did all these grand things, right? But if I write 1 page a day for 365 days, I got a huge book that people don't want to read, right? And so, but it's that process that you take, and it's a habitual thing, and I think it starts with making sure your mind is right, because once your mind is right, your thoughts then become your actions, and then that becomes your life. And so, I think just building those good daily habits.
Wow. Oh, powerful few minutes. Thank you so much, Reggie, Gavin, Brent, Clark, Mario, and I are just delightful to have you here. Delighted to have you here. It was such a great day, such a great conversation. So thank you much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Great to be
you.
here.
Thanks, everyone.